Yeah, I want to talk about that when it comes to this issue of abortion, because I think that's a great point. They're just trying to cause division. You heard the president himself, but a bunch of the left last week talk about this supposed case of there was a 10-year-old rape victim who was in Ohio, and she had to travel to Indiana to get an abortion because the Supreme Court had overturned Roe v. Wade, and how horrible this was to this poor 10-year-old who obviously would have been traumatized. I mean, just a horrible story to read about, right? Yeah. So there was PJ Media's Megan Fox not the actress Megan Fox. This is a different Megan Fox. This is a smart Megan Fox. She said the alleged story gave her a serious pause for a number of reasons. So she did a little bit of digging like an actual journalist should have been doing all along with, before spouting it all out as if it's just verifiably true. So she said a pregnant 10-year-old is evidence of a heinous crime against a child, but in every article, and there are so many, there is no mention of a criminal investigation, no police involvement, not even a town where this allegedly occurred. An unnamed alleged child abuse doctor called Dr. Caitlin Bernard to ask. So this is an abortionist in Indiana, by the way, was the person that they called to ask for help. But any doctor who knows of abuse would be required to also call law enforcement. There should be a criminal investigation going on involving Ohio DFS and the police. So, it really is interesting when you think about it. You're like, wait, how is she the first person who's brought that up? It's been reported in so many different outlets, and it's absolutely true. It's a 10-year-old. How in the world would there not be a criminal investigation even mentioned? It's almost as if it might not be true.
Yeah, it definitely does not seem like it's true. And it was, of course, used to make it seem like, these abortion laws are doing all these terrible things. That was the enemy of the story, not the rapist. Right? Not the rapist. That wasn't the enemy of the story. The enemy of the story was the travel to Indiana, I guess. That's the bad guy here. When in reality, if there is a second bad guy outside of the supposed rapist, it would be the doctor in Indiana who performed the abortion and did not report it. That would be a crime. That would be a crime. So, it's fascinating to see how this played out, because it was way too convenient a story. I mean, 10-year-old, I don't remember the number, but I think it's under the age of 15, there were only 50 abortions in the entire state for over an entire year. So the idea that a 10-year-old immediately after this is so super suspicious. Right. And the fact that nobody, including the president of the United States, bothered to even check on it is just so typical of the way these guys operate. When it's on their side, they don't care at all. They'll never do a fact check. They'll never call around. They don't care. The story was convenient for them. If it was the other way around, there would be exposés and long pieces in the Atlantic and all the things to overturn these. Even if it was mostly true, they'd find whatever detail was off and they'd take it apart and say it's mostly false. It's so typical of what to expect here. And thank God the good Megan Fox actually did that report.
Well, and it's funny because they say, it's not funny, but they say a 10-year-old, and the chances of a 10-year-old getting pregnant is probably very slim. I mean, I know this day and age with all the genetically modified food, I know girls are getting pregnant earlier. I still think it's it's done to
rare, certainly.
It's done to create sensationalism for us to get upset. Right. And then we find out the story is not accurate. So, big surprise. But this is the problem with me is they want to say, we have to have abortion in the instance of rape or incest. That is so rare. That is so rarely the cause of a pregnancy. And even if you look at the statistics, I think it's like 95%, I believe, of abortions are done selectively because they don't want to have the baby, not because of rape or incest. And I think it's obviously less than 5%. So this is how they control the narrative. They create, outrage with false, fake news. So
but by the way, really quickly, Snopes can't even confirm this story because the doctor won't return Snopes' phone calls, right? So I mean, I just wanted to, wanted to throw that in there. But you bring up a great point, and Stu, I'm sure that you know probably the actual statistics because you're the stats guy. But even if you gave them that tiny rape and incest, even if you said it doesn't make sense, right? Because if it's a life, it's a life. But even if you gave them that, they still wouldn't take it. Because that's not what it's about.
That's not what it's about. It's just their little point, which, and look, there's a lot of even on the conservative side, most of these states that are banning abortion have cutouts for that. Right. And, that's a whole nother situation. But you also have to kind of stop and say, even if this story were true, isn't it dumb Like,
Yeah.
the story there would be that a 10-year-old was raped. The
Right.
story would not be she had to travel for 50 minutes to get to her abortion. Like, that's not she's not going to look back at this in 20 years and go, you know what? Gosh, the worst part about that was the drive. The drive was really terrible. It's a horrific story that should have been reported completely differently, but they didn't care. They didn't care if it was true, and they didn't care if they focused on the right thing.
Yeah.
And if this was so rampant, they would have real examples to use of this instance.
Right. All right. So we got to take another quick break. First, we want to thank our sponsor, My Patriot Supply. So I don't know if you guys have noticed, but all across America, farmers are warning about